Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a safe place for leading with your heart. Hey, thanks for being here. You, Me, Empathy is the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective, a collaborative mental health community designed to empower each of us to grow our capacity for empathy, vulnerability, and emotional wayfinding. Just a friendly reminder that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. No one is just a silly boy with a feely heart. You can support the show by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts, following us on social media at Yumi Empathy and Feely Human, and joining the Feely Human Collective community at feelyhuman.co. And now your host, Known Wells.
Hello, Feely Humans. Welcome to another episode of Yumi Empathy. Thanks for being here. My name is Known Wells. I am your humble host. This is episode 147 on Why You Deserve to Be Heard with Dr. Judy Ho. Dr. Judy is a clinical and forensic neuropsychologist, and she's just lovely and a brilliant Feely human. And we explored creating space to reflect, toxic productivity and the cult of busyness, the usefulness of emotions, limiting beliefs, and why you deserve to be heard. Among many other things, Judy and I had a wonderful conversation. Give her a follow and buy her book and listen to her podcast, Supercharged Life. She is at Dr. Judy Ho on Instagram. Check her out. She's amazing. Before we get to the episode, though, I wanted to remind you in a week, I think I mentioned last week that this new podcast I'm doing with NAMI OC is going to be out today, but it's in fact going to be out a week from today, October 19th. It's called It's Okay to Feel. And it'll be a short run podcast through the end of the year, through early January abouts. And I'm very excited doing it with my pal Jennifer Lynn. And we're having in-depth conversations, in-depth topic explorations on various mental health topics. And Dr. Christina Iglesia is going to be a part of it, and Amanda Stern, and Jen Pasteloff, and a few others. Very excited. It's called It's Okay to Feel. Again, that will be available to subscribe and listen to on October 19th. Check that out. And I just want to say that a couple things. Yesterday was National Mental Health Day, and that's important to me. Mental health is important. Keep talking about it. Keep thinking about it. Keep exploring your heart. Keep feeling your feelings. That stuff is important. And if you need a safe, cozy space to feel your feelings and to talk about it, the Feely Human Collective is the space for you. So go to feelyhuman.co, feelyhuman.co. Check it out. Many ways to be a part of the community. And today, October 11th, as I record this, yesterday to you, it's National Coming Out Day. So I want to wish all of my LGBTQIA and trans and non-binary Feely humans out there, happy National Coming Out Day. You are beautiful. You are deserving of love. I see you. I accept you. You're amazing. I'm so happy you're here. I think that's about it. Please, 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 if you haven't left a review for Yumi Empathy in Apple Podcasts, it's an easy thing to do, and it supports me. And the more reviews this show has, the higher it climbs in the charts, and the more people see it. So if you want more empathy in the world, please, please, please leave a review for Yumi Empathy in Apple Podcasts. Check out feelyhuman.co for all Feely Human Collective things. Support me by buying stuff in the shop or contributing to the journal. We need new writers, so if you go to feelyhuman.co/journal, you can check out the writing guidelines there and all of that loveliness. And last thing I'll say is vote. Please vote. Vote, vote, vote. It's very important. I have a preference on who to vote for, and I'll just say I'm voting for Biden-Harris because the other option is a monster. So that's who I'm voting for. Please vote. It's important. I love you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to You Me Empathy. Thank you for leading with your heart and for feeling your feelings. And remember that you deserve to be heard, okay? That's what we're talking about today with Dr. Judy Ho. I hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, enjoy. Welcome to You Me Empathy, the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective. On this show, we explore the struggles, the triumphs, the brights, and the darks we face as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You Me Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. You Me Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I'm feeling wholly inadequate, but thoroughly overjoyed to be here with triple board certified and licensed clinical and forensic neuropsychologist, associate professor at Pepperdine University, TV and podcast host, and author of the book Stop Self-Sabotage. It's Dr. Judy Ho. Hello, Judy.
Hello. How are you
Hello.
today?
I'm great. That was a mouthful. You do a lot.
You made me sound way better than my everyday really looks like, but thank you. And thank you so much for doing what you do. I love the message that you're trying to spread and just reducing stigma about these conversations about mental wellness and mental illness. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And likewise to you. You know, you're doing the same in a way that's different. And I think that's the key, is that I think I was actually talking to this about let's get it right into it, because I was talking to this about this topic with my EMDR therapist this week and thinking about kind of some of the limiting beliefs I put on myself when it comes to doing this show and starting this new business, you know, that's based in this stuff, and feeling like I'm just a nobody. Like I don't have, you know, all of these accolades and all of these the training, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, you know, but the reality is lived experience is important. And I think there's so many ways that people can break down stigma, and people can help each other. And you don't have to have a doctorate to do that, right?
I completely agree with you. Formal education really only takes you so far. I would definitely say that I learned the most about my profession, my own mental wellness, how to work with my patients, really after the formal schooling process. It's really, like you said, about the lived experiences and walking the walk every single day and really putting yourself to the test in so many different ways. And so I 100% agree with you. Plus, I think you're so much more relatable than somebody who's a triple board certified clinical neuropsychologist. I think that you are somebody who people look at and say, wow, if he can do it, maybe so can I. And maybe I can get better too.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. That's very kind of you to say. So we always kick off the show, Judy, with an emotional check-in. How are you feeling today? How has your week been?
You know, my week has been okay. It's been really, it feels like one of those weeks where everything was compressed. I can't believe that We're talking on a Sunday morning, Pacific time. And I can't believe it's Sunday already. Sunday to me is the end of the week. I know some people think Sunday is the start of the week, but to me, it's the end. And I just feel like it flew by so quickly. And I don't know if you've been having this type of experience too, but I definitely feel like there's been some time distortion as we've been wading our way through the pandemic. I think there's some weeks where days seem to drag on. And then there are some days where I just can't believe that it's 4 p.m. already. Where did the time go? So that's kind of the week that I've had. I feel like I've gotten less done on my to-do list and I really wish I did. And already it's Sunday and we have to start over again.
Yeah, I feel that wholly. I'm definitely a Sunday ends the week guy, and also have felt disoriented by time lately. And it's because the natural things are like, I'm maybe not doing the things I used to do, or I'm not grounding myself in ways that came as a natural sort of integration to my routine that is suddenly disrupted, right? How are you combating that? How are you like finding yourself, self-care during that disruption? Like, how are you finding yourself back to like a more grounded place?
Well, for me, routine is really high on the list. So right now, I am still working pretty much completely virtually with my patients, and all my meetings are on Zoom and whatnot. So it's easy to just say, well, maybe I'll just get up when I feel like it, or I'll just skip a workout, or I don't really need to get out of my sweatpants today. But I really actually every single day make sure that my routine is in check. And so every single day I have the same routine. I have a morning routine. I have a workout routine. I get ready. I do all of that. And that definitely helps me. And then I think just leaving some time for reflection, which is something that I think is so important, that when I was younger, I definitely felt like there was a bit of that. What is the word for it? I mean, there's so many different terms. Sometimes we call it toxic productivity. Sometimes we call it hustle culture, right? But it's this idea of, oh, we're all so busy and we're going to brag about it. It's a really weird thing.
Crush all the things.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I think that actually the pandemic has really caused me to step back and say, maybe I'm not even doing enough self-reflection. I would love to say I'm doing, more. And so in the last few months, I think that's been a big part of my conscious focus, so that in addition to the reflections that I do in the morning during my morning routine, I'm also spending some time just throughout the day checking in with my feelings, saying it's okay to slow down. It's all right that I didn't get as much done on my to-do list like I feel this week. Yeah.
That's great. The reflection piece, I think, is crucial right now. It's like a crucial talking point right now that we're in this pandemic, because my sense is that people, including myself, are dealing with a lot more time and space with themselves, right? And maybe, this is me projecting, but I have this sense that they're dealing with a lot more time, and in that time is a lot more like reflecting on things or yourself or your feelings, right? And you have the space to do it now. And maybe it's uncomfortable because they haven't maybe practiced that talent.
It's a really good point. I think that people sometimes are afraid to be by themselves. And I know that there are many people, whether it's my patients or even family members and friends, who have said to me, I want to distract myself from too much self-reflection, because maybe there's a little bit of a fear that if you take the time to look, you might not like what you see, and I think that discomfort is very natural, and all of us are going to feel that way if we're being honest with ourselves. We're not going to think we're crushing it all the time. We're just perfect human beings. Obviously, we're not. And so you're going to see unseemly traits about yourself. Maybe the way you behaved, you're not so happy about something that had happened with a friend or a colleague. But if you take the time to slow down and look, I feel like it's kind of like those monsters underneath the bed when you were little. Once you actually look, it's not really as scary as you think it is.
Totally. That's such a good analogy. And it's we're projecting, or we're feeling that it's like this black and white sort of like wrong or right thing. But when we look at it close enough, like there's so much gray, and we feel like maybe going in that like, oh, this feeling is going to be bad or something, and I can't face that because that's uncomfortable, and that's a human. I totally understand that on a human level, but speaking from my own experience, when I look and I'm curious, there's a lot of wiggle room, right? There's a lot of like exploration that's really fruitful.
I think so too. And I think part of it is that I try to remind myself when I feel that discomfort that all the emotions that you feel, all the thoughts that you have, they're meant to move you forward. They're meant to have a purpose. There's a reason why you're feeling the way that you do. So whether it's fear or anger or sadness, emotions are very useful and they're evolutionarily adaptive, right? So they have a function. And I think the more that you get in tune with your thoughts and your feelings, the more you can then say, okay, this is a useful feeling. This is serving a purpose. This is trying to move me forward versus, okay, this is just a self-defeating thought or this is a self-defeating feeling. And then how do I deal with it in a way that isn't shoving it away, but it's more so that you can feel it and still do it anyway. So this idea of, okay, I feel the fear. I've assessed. I don't actually think this fear is adaptive in that, if I give into it, it's actually going to help me. In fact, if I give into it, I might actually self-sabotage or hold myself back. So I'm going to let that fear be. I'm going to acknowledge it, but I'm going to move forward anyway. Right. So I think it's this idea of not pushing away your feelings. And I think that our culture is really, has really been touting this message of, no negative feelings is good or avoid and distract. And I think that we should just learn to sit with it because feelings are so temporary anyway. And the more that you don't push it away, the quicker the discomfort actually goes away.
Right. No, that's so well said. And it's such an important clarification to say, we look at them, right? We look at those feelings and then we determine like, if it's true or not, because sometimes it's not true. Like sometimes it's not maybe based in reality. We have to look to ask that question. We have to look to ask those questions about our feelings. Like, is this going to move us forward, as you said, or is this something that's like based in a limiting belief, for example? Right? We have to ask if it's true or not.
Exactly. And I think limiting beliefs are things that we can absolutely work with because generally when we have these limiting beliefs, they take on a pattern. It's not the first time that you've had such a limiting belief. In fact, it's something that we probably categorize, whether you're somebody who maybe tends to catastrophize or you think of things in black and white, really kind of one spectrum versus the other and not the grays. You start to notice the patterns. And actually, it's really empowering when you see the patterns of your limiting beliefs, like, oh, this is the type of belief that always seems to trip me up. And then you learn ways to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Judy, I struggle with the limiting belief of that I don't deserve love, that I don't deserve like joyful experiences, and that I need to be in pain. Right? These are things I'm trying to unravel and sort of unpack and unlearn in EMDR. In your experience working with people, is there often a sort of childhood sort of base kind of experience tied to those limiting beliefs?
Well, first of all, I love that you're an EMDR. Are you liking the process? I mean, I know that EMDR is hard work, but do you feel like it's been fruitful and helpful for you?
Oh yeah, I mean, thanks for asking that. I am liking it so far. I've had maybe 4 reprocessing sessions thus far, so I'm still pretty early into the process. But the EMDR therapist that I'm going to, I like a lot. She's very open, and I think we reflect each other. She's just a very like warm, safe space for me. It feels like that, and it's initially it was, and I'd imagine this is probably the case for many people. Initially, there was this, am I doing this right? I want to make sure I'm maximizing, right? Like, the potential of this, great therapy and, but those thoughts aren't helpful in EMDR therapy, right? Like you really have to kind of give into the process really, you're honing your sort of mindfulness, like presence skills. And so far I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely tough work, but I also think that it can be so helpful to undo some of those traumas or difficult experiences, especially those that you've been carrying around a long time, perhaps since childhood. So back to your question, limiting beliefs, especially those that tell you that you're unlovable or that you're unworthy or undeserving. And in cognitive behavioral therapy language, we sometimes will call those core beliefs. And why do we say that they're core beliefs? Because it kind of permeates a lot of your life, so it might not just be, for example, how you feel about friendships or career. It might be all of those things, right? And the reason why they're a core belief is because generally they do emerge from childhood experiences when we generally, as blank slates coming into this world, are learning how the world responds to us, who we are in the world, how we should respond to others to be able to get our goals and our needs met. And if in our childhood we've had different types of experiences that basically tell you you're not loved, or at least cause you to question whether you're loved,
yeah,
because it's a period of imprinting in many ways where it's your first exposure on how the world works. And so that sticks with you so much more than, for example, if an experience was to happen in your adulthood. Let's say you have a romantic relationship, you get horribly rejected by a partner, but you had that secure base as a child. And so it's not so much that you feel like you're just unlovable, period. You're like, okay, well, this person made me feel unlovable. And so I do think that these deeper limiting beliefs or core beliefs tend to come from childhood, because that's when we're soaking everything up. And those experiences stick with us much longer than we would like them to, even if you've had experiences in adulthood that actually would refute that. And it's because our brains are much better at assimilating new information into existing structures or beliefs than taking that new information and saying, ooh, maybe I should change the structure of my beliefs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I wonder, because I do have conversations with people on this show a lot, and there is a lot of like those early imprintings, right? Those early experiences that, form who we are, and we take them into our adulthood, and they become the limiting beliefs. They become the things that hold us back, or what have you. Or, even things like, looking at the ACE studies, right? And thinking about those early traumas and how they're related to, substance use disorders or depression or suicidality, things like that. It's how do we combat that? Because I can see a scenario where a kid is feeling maybe alone and unloved, like I felt growing up, Judy, and the parents not maybe necessarily knowing, like, how do we bridge that gap, like early on? How do we like face that early on as parents? I'm not a parent, but like I'd imagine there are a lot of parents listening. Like, how do we counteract that earlier than, you get into your 20s and 30s and you're like, holy shit, I had depression and I didn't realize it, right?
Right. And I think that sometimes, it really depends, obviously, on the way the experience was felt, and also the way that the person, is making sense of that experience as they come more into themselves and have reflected. And I think that sometimes people will come to a reflection where they say, you know what, my parents had their own problems and they truly did the best that they could, and they had no idea how much they were hurting me with everything that they were doing and saying. And other times you don't come to that reflection. You come to, well, this is on purpose. They wanted to hurt me, and I think it really does change how then you heal, because you can heal, both ways, but it's just the approach will be a bit different. And, obviously I think sometimes it is hard because most people don't do that kind of deeper self-reflection until they're adults. And as you might have already heard about in your therapy or talking with people, memory is very subjective. It's not really like a video playback. It's more of an interpretive process. And so I think depending on what the interpretation is, either you're looking for closure with that person or you have to find it within yourself. And I think a big part of it is overcoming a feeling of helplessness and finding a way to explain what happened that leaves your self-concept intact. And I think that's so important because when we feel like our self-concept is not intact or that it's sort of subject to whatever's happening around us, it's so much harder then to develop a core set of coping skills that are consistent and that you believe will work.
Right. Yeah. The knowing ourself, that journey is crucial to this.
Yes. And it's obviously a lot harder than it's not that fun. If you're doing self-development well, it's not supposed to be a picnic. I think,
right.
Sometimes I look at, again, you look at Instagram, you look on social media and people are like, I'm reading this empowerment book and I'm doing self-development. I'm like, if you're not crying half the time, you're not doing it. You're not really digging deep enough,
Yeah, I do know. I love a good cry.
Oh, me too. I'll make myself do it by watching certain movies that I know trigger me. And it's so funny because the movies that trigger me are very, very simple. In the past, a good Disney movie will do it, like Lion King or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but
Mufasa dying?
Right? I know. And that was even when I was a kid and I felt invincible. But, as I've become older and I can tell that my priorities are shifting, the kind of things that make me cry are not the kind of things, in the past would have ever made me shed a tear. And they're things more like family stories where I see a very close bond between a child and a parent, for example, so it's kind of funny. It's really funny how now I think my priorities have shifted and I care more about those types of relationships.
Yeah. What was the context of your last good cry?
Oh gosh, let me think. Oh, it was yesterday. It was yesterday.
Wow.
I know. This is very fresh. This is a great question. So, I have been very, very stressed out this week at work. I think I just have, this is not a new revelation, but because of what I do, most of my work is as a provider of mental health services, or I'm teaching students. And so I'm always in a caretaking role. And every once in a while, I just, I get to that place of, oh my gosh, what about me? I've been taking care of people all week and there's been some very, very, complex patients that I've had to work with this week and a few difficult students. And I think the context of the cry was, I don't feel like my emotional needs were being taken care of. And I didn't even need a movie or a good musical for this one. I just started crying while I was journaling. But I think it's good. To me, I feel like the fact that I can cry and shed tears, I'm happy when I cry only because I know that I'm not shutting my feelings down.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a check, oh, good. I can still do it. That's kind of what I do with coffee sometimes. I drink coffee every single day, including weekends. And every once in a while, every few months, I'll just not drink coffee one day. I'll be like, can I still do it? It's like that. It's I just want to make sure that my feelings are still there. And so
I love that.
Yeah. So I'm actually happy that I was able to kind of cry it out and actually felt it's very cathartic. It feels good afterwards. I'm like, oh, now I feel better. I think I already feel so much better just by crying. It's not like I've solved the problem, but I do already feel better.
Have you taken the Enneagram test?
No, but I've been looking into it lately. Do you like that test?
I like it. I think it's there's a lot of nuance to it, which I appreciate. So I was relating when you were talking about, feeling like your own cup isn't being filled up. I relate to that deeply because I'm a type 2, which is the helper. And the helper in the Enneagram is someone who, gets a lot of joy and value out of helping others, right? Putting ourselves, second, right, to others. Yes. But, as that can be a difficult thing at times. And sometimes I can take that too far and even be emotionally manipulative. And I can forget about me, right? Which then becomes like this thing where, well, I'm not actually like being able to truly help others because I'm completely depleted, you know?
Yeah. And I think that that's why this whole conversation about self-care, I do think that it's shifting. I mean, I think that people still sometimes roll their eyes at it like, oh, self-care. But actually, more people now are saying this is not something that's optional, it's crucial. And
Yeah.
even people who, as you mentioned, might be helpers, the type 2 or even the achiever type 3. I mean, it's like if you want to keep achieving and you want to be able to keep reaching those goals and hitting it hard, if you're not doing self-care, like you're going to burn out, right? And I found that again, self-care starting to be a bit less stigmatized, and so is the term burnout. Although I think among a lot of professionals who tend to see mental health symptoms as a characterological weakness, they might be able to cop to burnout, but they still won't say, you know what, I've been depressed lately,
Yeah.
because there's that is there overlap. Obviously burnout, if you don't treat it, will turn into depression. Also, burnout and depression have overlapping symptoms. But I find that, especially among professionals, doctors, lawyers, fields where, perhaps talking about your feelings wasn't the number one on the training list, it's harder for them to say, yeah, I've been depressed lately, but they might be able to say, I've been burnt out.
Why isn't part of the lexicon or part of the sort of education, why isn't there a piece of it that covers the getting more comfortable with like, hey, I have needs too. Hey, I maybe have depression. Let's talk about it.
I think it's two things. One is there's definitely a culture in certain professions, and I mentioned a few of them, physicians, attorneys, I mean, even to some degree, psychologists. I went to a Research One university for my PhD, and they're a bit more hardcore in that, they think of themselves as scientists, right? Scientists first and clinicians second in many ways. And so again, they're very logically minded. It's very analytical, but not necessarily in an emotional way. And so they sort of see that as, yeah, if you want to go to therapy, go ahead. But, we're not going to even necessarily wholly encourage that. But if you go to, like, for example, a Masters of Family Therapy program where, it's really about the clinical process. I mean, most programs that I know of, they encourage all their students to go get therapy while they're students. Like, you need to go sit on the other side. So I think part of it is just the culture of this sort of go-getter. You're supposed to just be logical and just get over yourself and just keep going. It's like a cultural value to be kind of stoic in some ways and keep your problems to yourself. But then I think the second piece of it is that a lot of the people who are sort of within these cultures, I'll just call them cultures because they are professional cultures, they just don't ever talk about it. There's no space to talk about it. They don't speak about it. So then you don't realize that probably everybody feels the same way you do, but no one's talking about it. And so I think that a lot of it is sort of just this culture of silence about mental health concerns. You're supposed to just believe everybody's life is great or something, but it's crazy, right? I mean, nobody's life is great all the time. And it's like, there's no space to talk about that. And so I think they haven't carved out that space in like any of the formal classes or anything like that. And I think that that's something that needs to change, because I've been working with a lot of physicians, especially lately, right now in the pandemic, with them being frontline workers. And, their mental health is falling apart. And still, there's not a huge conversation. And I think some of that has to start at the organizational level. Your supervisors and your bosses have to be like, we're going to have, a mental health day. Like, everyone's going to get to take one this month. You guys tell us when you want to do it and we'll do it. I mean, it's just not happening enough. And I have seen a couple of companies that are trying to move the conversation forward, maybe providing, a space, maybe getting a speaker to come talk about burnout. So some organizations are opening that up, but it's still so hard because then you're in those conversations and nobody wants to volunteer a story because they're afraid that they're going to be judged by their coworkers the next day.
Yeah, I see the double-edged sword there. But so I in May I launched this new sort of business called the Feel Human Collective, and it's part of it is, an aspect of the business is doing workshops about mental health and empathy. And I've done a few in like local, universities here in Southern California. And, I wanted, the goal is to like bring them into businesses and to organizations like that, right? To like really like come in and talk about this stuff because it's killing people, right? People are dying, right? Men feel like they can't talk about their feelings, and this is leading to death, right? Suicide, heart failure, all these things, and it's devastating. It hurts me. It pains me.
Yes. And I wish people, like you said, would be more open about their experiences, because then you'll realize that you're not alone. And as human beings, that is such a big part of our existence, right? It's just to feel that we are tied to a greater good and a bigger community than ourselves. And when you don't talk about it, you feel like you're the only one suffering the way that you are. And then when you talk about it, you realize, oh, at the very least, there's all of these other people who actually do feel the way I do and can understand me. And sometimes, just like a good cry, even though you haven't solved the problem, you feel a bit better already. Like some weight has been lifted off your shoulders. And right now, especially during the pandemic, we're seeing that more people are depressed, and in a clinical way. This is not just, oh, I was depressed today. I mean, we've seen those early studies that no, they are registering clinical levels of depression more than ever before. People who've not even had a history of mental illness before have now basically qualified for a diagnosis. And still, I don't think that we're talking about enough or doing enough. I think we're kind of focusing our energy sometimes in the wrong places. I know there's a lot of frustration everywhere. Politically, it's a tough time, especially in the United States. But I feel like some of that anger and frustration is because people aren't doing the inner work and recognizing that obviously their feelings have nowhere to go. And anger is a very primitive emotion.
Yep. It's often the first one we go to.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think you touched on a very important thing, which is the fact that we need each other, right? Like I talk endlessly about this on this podcast. And when I had Lori Gottlieb on, she said, we grow in connection with others, right? That's how we do it. And I feel the more we can have these conversations and fight back against this, you put it as toxic positivity culture or toxic masculinity, these cultures of toxicity that says we need to be these beacons of strength at all times and individualistic. Like these are factually flawed, very flawed, right? Like it's okay to be a beacon of strength. It's okay to like have some independence. Like that's great. That's a value, but we can't do it alone.
Yes. And I think that is something that, again, it's not going to take one day, but it's going to take change at multiple levels, at the individual level, at the organizational level. But I do think that it comes from an older idea that, like you said, they have to be these beacons of strength. And only then can you help people who basically, whether you want to verbalize it or not, you essentially see as quote unquote weaker than you because they need help, right? As opposed to the model where, and I think that again, this is more emerging, but it's obviously still not the mainstay, the model of no, somebody who's actually been through it and can actually empathize with what you've been through is better suited to help you because they'd understand you more and they'd have tried certain techniques and be able to advise you on the ones that have worked and the ones that you might want to try first because it worked for them. I don't think that that's a very common part of our culture yet, but it should be. I mean, again, people who say, I've never felt depressed ever in my life, like not even after, for example, losing a loved one or a terrible breakup or moving across country to start a new job where you had no friends and family. If you say that you've not even felt a tingle of depression, even if it was just for a few days or a couple weeks, I don't know how truthful that person is being when they're talking to you,
Yeah. I wish I can describe my depression as a tingle. That seems like such a nicer time.
I know. And it's kind of amazing that people won't even cop to that, right? Like, yeah,
Right.
I felt depressed for a few days. It's like, yeah, you know what? It's within the span of human emotion. So yes, you should have felt it because, again, you're human.
Exactly.
But it's so, so weird that we still have all of this judgment. And I think, and that's why I love the work that you're doing and, trying to do more workshops, educating people, because I do think it starts with education. I think
Yeah.
it's going to take a little while before people might feel ready to go to therapy. And I'm not pushing that on every single person. It may not be right for them, but even just getting that education opens their mind up to, the real facts, and hopefully that information is going to sit with them for a little bit. They're going to chew it up, and then eventually say, you know what, now I feel more comfortable if I ever needed to go to therapy to actually make that call and take that first step.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think a little bit about like what's going on right now with the Black Lives Matter movement and me, as a white person confronting my sort of white fragility, confronting my place in a system of white supremacy, right? And educating myself and getting into the nitty-gritty of discomfort in that recognition and that education, right? And like it is uncomfortable at first. It is scary at first, but it's necessary. It's necessary for growth.
I think so too. And I think that again, it's obviously can be very polarizing depending on who you're speaking with in terms
Sure.
of the Black Lives Movement. And I think some of that, when we get really, really defensive about something, like a bit more of an overreaction, that just means that there's something interesting to look at. You don't have to automatically think that I'm a bad person. Like, whoa,
Right.
why am I being so? No, it's just, hey, something's here that's making you super emotional about it, right?
Yep.
And let's look at what that is. And I do think that it's not, again, I think sometimes people really want those very clear, defined answers to life, and you're just not going to have it. So, with the Black Lives Matter too, I mean, there's so many nuances, right? In terms of people of color, I'm a person of color. I'm Chinese, but I'm not, well versed in the actual felt experience of a Black American.
Yep.
Although I work with them often in my research, and I look at ethnic minorities and how they experience the mental health system, I can't say that I understand what it's like, though, to be one of them in their experiences.
Right.
I wish I could, but I can't. And so even that level of ambiguity sometimes is discomforting, right? Because it's like, well, what do I do with this knowledge? I kind of understand what it's like to be a person of color, but it's not the same experience as an African American in America. But
Right.
I also can relate maybe a little bit more on this dimension, but not on this other dimension, so it's not clear. And I think that that's kind of how self-development is also. You might spend some time journaling, going to therapy, and you still won't have it all figured out. And guess what? You're never going to have it all figured out. Self-development is a lifelong journey, and none of us are really done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is the lifelong journey. It is the journey, right? And that is what life is.
Yes.
So you mentioned being Chinese. I'm curious about your background, your life prior to becoming this world-renowned psychologist, and all these accolades and stuff. Like how did you face and talk about mental health, like in your family and your sort of early experiences?
Well, I was born in Taiwan and I immigrated to the United States when I was about the age of 9. And so I think it's interesting. My parents are a bit of a dichotomy. They're very traditional in many ways in terms of their cultural values, but then in other ways, they're very liberal, meaning, the fact that they even immigrated, I mean, that's a liberal move, just to leave your country. I couldn't do what they did at the age of 30 something, pick up, leave all your family and friends, don't know a language, and just move to a different country. I mean, that's what they did for us. And
Wow.
I will always appreciate that because I can tell you right now, I would not have that kind of bravery and courage. But I also think that, on the one hand, they're very, traditional in that they value things like stoicism. That is one of those cultural values in Chinese culture where it's sort of like, don't get too emotional, but at the same time, they are liberal in that they never told me and my sister what we had to do for our careers. They never told us who we could or could not date. They welcomed, people of all different backgrounds to our house, whether their different religions, their sexual preference, like it didn't matter to them. And so I do feel very lucky in some ways, but definitely in Taiwan, if I was still in Taiwan, I probably wouldn't have become a psychologist because, it's still not that popular there really, because there is still this idea of mental health maybe not being on the same par as physical health, which of course it's all related and tied together. It should be, but it's not that way there. And I do remember that when I was younger, and, I had in junior high experience being bullied by a very mean group of girls. And I remember a conversation that I had with my parents about how sad I was feeling about it. I mean, it never got so bad that I wasn't going to show up in school, but obviously it was a very unpleasant experience for several months. And I remember trying to express my feelings to my parents about it. And their answer was like, "Oh, just don't worry about it. Like, don't be sad about it." And they still do that sometimes. They still do that sometimes. And now as an adult, I'll tell my parents, "Well, you know what? It's okay if I'm sad too. You don't have to fix it for me. I'm just letting you know that that's how I feel." Obviously as a kid, I didn't know how to say that. But like now I try to remind them, "Hey, by me saying this, maybe it's making you feel uncomfortable, but I'm fine with it." You know what I mean? I don't need you to take care of me either, and I think that sometimes you have to remind people of that.
You do. Yeah, that's really well said. And so you have these experiences, you've grown up in this, somewhat traditional, somewhat, liberal household. Like when did you first start sort of getting excited about exploring mental health as a profession?
Probably by the time I was in high school. I just noticed that a lot of my friends were always coming to me for advice. And and at the same time, I was also participating in the Big Brothers, Big Sisters program. And I was a mentor to a child who was maybe 4 or 5 years younger than me. And she was in the foster system. She was 10 and she had already been in and out of 15 different foster homes. I mean, it was
oh my God,
unbelievable. She had been through so much trauma in her life. She would like get to know somebody and after a couple of months get moved, and anyway, so I was only 15 and I didn't know what I was doing. I just thought, hey, I'll do something that sounds good. Plus it'll look good on my resume for college. I mean, that's kind of how simple it was when I started, but it was such a profound experience for me just to realize that even though I didn't really know what I was doing, just the fact that I showed up every Wednesday to take her to ice cream or, go to a movie or share a lunch, that was profound for her too. Just the fact that somebody would always show up, right? It's that idea of an unconditional support. And I still write to her and she writes back to me from time to time. So we're still in touch
beautiful
today. Yeah. But that's really when I got my first inkling that, one person can make such a huge difference. And I really wanted to make even more of a difference. And that's why I decided to go to school for psychology. So I can actually truly say that I'm living the career that I always wanted to, even since I was only 15 years old. And I've been very, very fortunate that, even though I've been open to other paths along the way, I thought about, okay, maybe I should go into business. Maybe I should do something else. Like I did entertain other things temporarily, but I really just found that this was what was the most rewarding for me ultimately.
Yeah, and I can feel that in your voice. It's a joy for you, and that's so powerful. And I think finding that in our lives is a pursuit worth seeking. I love the relation or the connection to your experience with the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. What a great organization and a perfect example of like the change that we can enact as humans, right? One person at a time. And that's what it takes, right? One person at a time, don't you think?
I absolutely think so. And, in the beginning of this conversation, you were saying, yeah, sometimes, you struggle with the self-doubt of, well, should I be doing this? Can I be
Right.
doing this? Like, what difference am I making? And I would just say you're making a huge difference, in the lives of people who have heard your story, seen the work that you do, see the passion and dedication that you have. And that really resonates with them.
Yeah.
So I really, like I said, just so appreciate what you're doing because you're setting a great example that one person can make a big difference, even when you don't realize that you're making that difference, maybe, right? Like, oh, I just had a conversation today. How could I have really helped? But you did, it's just amazing sometimes how profound even a simple conversation could be for a person at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, and you did, and you are doing, Judy, and I think that's that's why I'm here, and that's why I invited you on because of the work that you're doing. And speaking of that work, it's kind of serendipitous because so you're in this area of neuropsychology, or that's one of the areas where you sort of focus. And believe it or not, I just this week saw or I've been having some weird neuro symptoms, like slurring my words and having brain fog, and it's this long story. But I'm going to see a neuropsychologist soon, and I'm very excited.
Wow! Oh, good. So you're going to go and check out how your brain's working.
Exactly. They're to try to determine, is this a neurological thing or is it related to the hormone issues I've been having or my depression? Things like that.
Yeah, that's
so.
great.
Thank you. So what is, for the listeners, what is neuropsychology? Like, what is that field like aiming to do?
So neuropsychology is the branch of psychology that is concerned with how the brain and the rest of your nervous system influences a person's cognitive functions and their behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes what a neuropsychologist does is investigates how your brain is functioning in conjunction with, any other types of clinical conditions that person might also be dealing with and trying to decipher what is what. Just as you already stated, having brain fog could be a side effect or symptom of depression. It could be related to part of the trauma work that you've been doing. It could be something more neurologic. It could be a lot of different things. And like you said, even hormonal. Yeah, I have hypothyroidism. And I remember when it was not treated, my brain fog was crazy. I thought I had early dementia, because I was having such a hard time with being able to, basically like hit my work life as hard as I usually was able to. And once my hypothyroidism was diagnosed and treated, things got better. But I didn't know this at the time, but apparently it is a somewhat common symptom of untreated hypothyroidism, which of course is a hormonal endocrine system based illness. And so there could be so many different things. And so neuropsychologists tend to be more well-versed in physiological psychology. They've done some extra studies to really understand brain function. And they're really, meant to be very good diagnosticians. That's really the bulk of the work that they do. And then once they diagnose a problem, they come up with a very specific treatment plan that's targeted to the person's individual issues and strengths and areas for improvement. And then they facilitate them to work with the practitioners that can help them with those things.
Right. It seems like there's a lot of curiosity and inquiry in that field.
Yeah, I think people are kind of fascinated by it. And it's definitely still a very small group of psychologists who want to do that kind of work because, there's a bit of a more of a scientific leaning to it. And so a lot of psychologists, they get into the field because they really want to do much more clinically focused work where really they're on the therapy side much more squarely than maybe on the diagnostic side even. And so I think it kind of takes an interesting person who might, kind of like the science, but also like working with people. And then this is kind of what they come up with. And I think that definitely speaks to me because I do love sometimes the more pragmatic and analytical parts of our field. And I think for my personality too, I really love being able to look deeper into something, solve a problem. And I, I think I'm working with my interests and my strengths. And I really think that people who are clinicians who are seeing patients for therapy 30 to 40 hours a week, wow, more power to them, because that's a lot. That's a lot of energy that you're also giving out. Taking care of people in the process can be very slow with certain types of conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you your hypothyroidism? Like, how was it determined that that was it? And what was your sort of feelings and thought processes like as you were having these brain fog moments?
It was really weird because it started happening when I was around maybe 29 years old. And I was a postdoctoral fellow at UCLA, and I would just start to have what felt like narcolepsy. Like in the middle of the afternoon, I would get so tired that I literally couldn't keep my head off the desk. I was so exhausted, and it was never like that before. And then I would try to tell people about it, and my friends and my family are like, "Well, but you barely sleep. That's why." I'm like, I know, but I do barely sleep. Sometimes I would only sleep like 4 hours a day. But I was also like, that's never happened to me though. Like I sleep 4 hours a day, and I'm not going to be like having narcolepsy on my desk. And I was training for a triathlon at the time. So I was like, I had this crazy workout regimen. And so I was working out more than ever before. I was eating more healthy than ever because I was training. And I had gained almost 20 pounds, which again, it's kind of interesting, the people in your life. I think, again, maybe they're just trying to help you solve a problem, but they end up sounding dismissive. They're like, well, that's just because it's all muscle. I'm like, I definitely did not gain 20 pounds of muscle. That didn't happen to me.
Right.
So, I think people, whenever I would bring it up to people, they would just tell me that everything was fine. Even the first couple of endocrinologists I went to go see, because I was referred to them by my primary physician, like, we need to look into, some of these other more subtle things because, maybe they need to run a panel on you, et cetera, et cetera. Even the first couple of endocrinologists were very dismissive. I had told them, for example, about how I was cold all the time, even when the weather was like 75 degrees outside, and that would be falling asleep on my desk every day. And that I had gained 20 pounds. And, I'm a pretty slender person. So even when I gained 20 pounds, I wasn't, anywhere near obese or anything. And it was kind of amazing. I had a couple of physicians very flippant with me, like, oh, okay, so you're a size 6 now, big deal. I'm like, wow. That's not really the point. Yeah. Like, I mean, yes, you're right. I'm not obese, but it's not right that I would gain 20 pounds when I'm eating healthy and working out 6 days a week in a very specific way. So anyway, it took like 2 years before I actually got an endocrinologist who would really look at my symptoms and basically say, you know what, we need to run a more extensive battery of tests to see what's going on. And they actually found out that I had an autoimmune version of the condition, which is called Hashimoto's. And so it's generally a bit more tough to control it, to bring it under control with medication and with lifestyle stuff. But once we identify the problem, I just had a huge sigh of relief. Like, again, it's like one of those things, like we've been talking about this whole conversation. I hadn't solved the problem yet, but even just getting to the point of, that catharsis of, oh, okay, I have an answer.
Answers are key. I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
Took 2 years. Took 2 years. It was so frustrating.
So what I'm feeling as you were talking about that, Judy, is frustration myself, right? Like, I've had lots of weird things. Like right now, my doctors can't figure out why my testosterone is turning into estrogen. I have like abnormally high levels of estrogen for some reason. And I hear stories of like my good friend Laura Parker, who is basically, she has endometriosis and vaginismus, who has basically felt sort of gaslit by the medical community. And like hearing you talk about like having to take 2 years, that seems not great, right? Like, It feels like at a certain point, we have to believe people, right? We have to believe, like, we have to trust our own bodies and believe that we're telling the truth. And then the medical establishment needs to believe us, right?
Yes. And it made me feel incredibly disempowered. And that was definitely not helpful for, how I was feeling at the time, because I had no answers. I felt disempowered. I felt like I was being shut down by physicians, to the point where you start to question yourself. Maybe you're the
Absolutely.
crazy one. You're the crazy one who's just making it up, and that is frustrating. And I think that so much of what I was hoping to accomplish was just getting an answer. I didn't really need, all of the answers at once, but I did need a answer as to why I was suffering. So
Yeah.
I really hope that your journey to finding out what's going on with you isn't going to be so difficult. I hope that you can find out sooner rather than later. And yeah, hormones and the endocrine system are so weird because they all impact each other. So like the fact that maybe your hormones are out of balance with the testosterone and estrogen, it might mean that something else in the system is also a bit off balance. And so
Right.
you got to like figure it all out. But endocrinology is tough. I mean, talk about a field that doesn't have black and white, firm answers. I feel like there's
Right.
a lot of nuances in that field.
Right. And that is an important perspective for me as a patient, to have and to understand that like they're trying to figure it out, like having faith in that and having faith in the fact that maybe the field is newer or the research on it is not as in depth or something. Like that's an important perspective, but it's also important to feel like you're being cared for and feel like there's compassion, and I have been in situation, and I am again, white male. I am in a situation where I'm in a much better position than even just a woman, right, in that position. So it does feel like there needs to be some change.
Yes. And I think that the more people know, and this is why knowledge is so powerful, the more you know, the more you will feel efficacious when you go to your doctor to ask the right questions and at least to engage in the dialogue. At least when I was younger, and certainly I think even when I was 29, if a physician shut me down, I would just say, okay, fine, and I just go home, right?
Yeah.
I don't really do that now. Like if they say, well, I don't think that that's what's happening, I'll be like, well, why not? Can you please explain to me? Because I did read a couple of studies about XYZ, and I want to know how this makes sense with the experience that I'm having, right? And I think even just feeling empowered to engage in dialogue as if you are, an informed consumer. You're not a physician. I'm not a physician, but like being able to say, I did some research into this and I actually have some questions I'd like you to answer for me. That does go a long way, because I think sometimes we do feel kind of like, well, they're the experts, so if they say that everything's fine, I guess it's fine.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, we put them on pedestals, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you know what? They're dealing with their stuff too, right? I mean, just like we were talking about, oh my gosh,
Totally.
like they're not perfect. They got their own stuff. They're exhausted probably, maybe they've got some stuff going on at home, and they're not going to be as invested in your health as you are. So you've got to take that step of asking all those questions and switching doctors if you have to, which is what basically I had to do eventually. But, the fact that it took me 2 years, it's because it took me months before I said, you know what, I don't think I'm getting anywhere with this doctor. I gave him a lot of time.
Yeah. And this is like a moment I want to just talk to the listeners for a second and just say what Judy just said, what I have been saying, you're your own best advocate, right? Like you need to stand up for yourself and believe in yourself and know that like your health and your healing it matters. It matters deeply. And, you are deserving of getting that help, and you're deserving of finding those answers.
Yes. And I think that really knowing that you are the advocate, that you are your best advocate, and that your experience matters and that you deserve to be heard. I mean, I think all of that too is tied into your beliefs about yourself, right? So back to what we started this conversation with, like if you have certain limiting beliefs, if you believe that you aren't worthy or that you're not as competent or that you don't deserve to be loved or cared for, you deserve to be in pain, these are all very common core beliefs that many people struggle with. It is going to make it harder for you to basically do as if and say, you know what, maybe I don't feel like a very lovable, worthy person today, but I'm still going to act like I am. And that is, I think, a powerful technique from dialectical behavior therapy of like acting as if, like, even if you're not feeling whole at the moment, like what would a person who felt like they were whole do? You know, like they would advocate for themselves and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted.
Yes, absolutely. How is this stuff we're talking about related to? So you wrote this book on self-sabotage. How is it related to self-sabotage?
So I think we self-sabotage because the fight or flight reflexes get engaged a bit prematurely. I mean, obviously fight or flight is adaptive. It's amazing. It's how we've survived all this time. But human beings are meant to enact that at, really only certain periods of time. And they should only be very short bursts of activation. And yet, over time, I think we start to fear things that probably aren't going to be life or death stakes emotionally or physically. And yet the fight or flight gets engaged anyway. And when that happens, you're going to be so much more tunnel vision about avoiding whatever threat that you think is in front of you, whether that's emotional, psychological, or physical. Then you're going to be thinking about this idea of also balancing that with attaining rewards from your environment, which, we need both to survive. We need to attain rewards and balance avoiding threat that really is there. So I think the self-sabotage switch goes on when we start to think about the avoidance of fear, maybe prematurely, or maybe when it's really not necessary, like the fight or flight is being engaged too quickly, when the situation doesn't necessarily call for it. But that all goes back to, well, where is that coming from? Because all of us have different reasons why we might actually prematurely engage that fight or flight and want to avoid something. And I think some of it comes from limiting beliefs from childhood. Some of it comes from a lower self-esteem, but also some of it comes from things like fear of change or the unknown, or even excessive need for control. Those are the four main factors that I see impact people's self-sabotage switch. And for any individual, it could be all four of those things. It could be primarily just one or a combination of those four. And so that's really what I start my book out with, is like, let's do a self-assessment and see what is your particular self-sabotage trigger. And then once you realize that, you can actually go through the steps to work through it and actually start to eradicate that behavior from your life.
Do you personally fall into any of those four self-sabotage behaviors?
I think that the category that I ascribe to the most is probably a need for control. It's like that sort of perfectionism, but the perfectionism might not actually be really leading you anywhere. It's really just like this idea of perfectionism. Like you need to be able to see things, like very, very clearly before you take certain steps. Like I'm the kind of person, for example, if somebody tries to change a plan on me last minute, I get very annoyed. And mostly that's a control thing. You know what I mean? It's like, what's the big deal? So you're late 20 minutes, but like I get way more annoyed than probably the average person would. And that's what I was speaking to you earlier about, that like if you get overly emotional about something or you have an overreaction, like that's something you need to look at, and so that's kind of where I came up with that. And so what people don't realize is that procrastination is actually a behavior that is born out of sometimes perfectionism and an excessive need for control, because you don't want to get started on a project until you can like really do it. And then before long, you've not started on the project at all. And I would say that in my 20s, that was definitely my main self-sabotage thing, is like, I would convince myself that procrastinating would make me better. Like, oh, I'll just wait till the last minute. Then I'll be really, really energized to do a great job with this project. And of course, eventually you fail because, you didn't leave yourself enough time, and then you get schooled for that. And so, but I did tell myself all those very unhelpful narratives, and it's still something that I have to watch today. It's like, what? That propensity is there, and you always have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Control has been, I think in my late teens into early 20s, coming from an environment where, I felt alone, I felt like not seen. And then, I was essentially trying to like mediate a marriage emotionally, that was doomed to fail, and the marriage and my parents, I mean, and then coming out of that, I put that control right into an eating disorder that lasted, about 10 years or so. Control, man, it's going to fuck you up. It can fuck you up.
Yes, it really can. And I think it's also the perception of control, which I've really had to remind myself about. And more than anything, I think the pandemic has actually allowed me to work on that for myself a bit, because you know what? There is so little that you can control. But it's funny because really the real realization behind all of this is that you might have thought you had more control before, but you really kind of didn't. It's just that the pandemic made that so much more obvious,
Right.
There is only so much we can control in our lives. We can only control our own behaviors, what we do about our own thoughts, and how we choose to deal with our emotions. You really can't control much else. And so, for example, being in an intimate relationship, that's tough for somebody who's a bit of a control freak, right? Because you doesn't matter what you do, you could do all the right things, quote unquote, and that person still might not love you back. That person still might mistreat you,
Yeah.
And you have to be sort of understanding that a lot of that's on them, and it's not about you. But it is hard to not put that on yourself. Like if you have a horrible breakup, it's much easier to think, okay, well, I'm just not lovable. But sometimes it's about the other person and their own neuroses that they haven't worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Judy, as we start to wrap up here, let's talk about empathy heroes.
Yay!
So this is the part of the show where I'm talking to you listeners. My guests and I each list an empathy hero from our lives, someone who is deeply empathetic, compassionate person. It could even be a character from a novel we love or a movie we love. I will go first, Judy,
Yay.
to give you a moment to think about yours. Yesterday, so on Saturdays, my wife and I like to just kind of put aside any work and just focus on house stuff, so yesterday I was cutting some wood and fixing, some of these awnings things that we have in our house. And I was listening to an audiobook called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Haruki Murakami. And I finished the whole book yesterday. It's only like 5 hours in Audible time, but I loved it. And it's, as a runner myself and as someone who thinks he's a writer as well, like it's a memoir about writing and running, and it's really beautiful. And talk about someone who has a lot of discipline in their life. Murakami seems like a guy who does, but he said something in that book that I just loved. And it's this: pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. And I take that to heart because I am someone who, in my low moments, in my clinical depression moments, in my sort of I'm holding on too tight to like certain childhood trauma moments, I put suffering upon myself. I feel like I need to suffer. I feel like life is suffering. And that's not good. That's not good thinking. So hearing Murakami say that pain is inevitable, it's inevitable. We all experience pain, right? But suffering is optional. We have control over that. I think, helped me find a little perspective yesterday.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
So would you say that he's your empathy hero of the moment? Or
yes, Murakami is my empathy hero. And this is the first book I've read by him. And I know he's written many. So I'm excited to jump into his pretty extensive catalog.
Yeah, that's amazing. My empathy hero, she is no longer alive, but it is my maternal grandmother. And I feel like that's sometimes what happens. People will say, well, I didn't get that kind of unconditional love from my parents, or maybe I felt like my parents were more judgy, but maybe a grandparent wasn't so judgy, right? And then and I think that that's so true. When I talk to my mom, even though she really adored her mother, their relationship was much more like this grandmother that I think is this model of unconditional love and empathy, was much more critical of my mother.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. I can't even make heads or tails of that one because I only experienced my grandmother the way that she treated me.
Sure.
And I just felt like I could do no wrong in her eyes. Like anything that I did was just amazing to her.
Mm.
And so I do think that that's a really beautiful experience because, again, here's another thing about Chinese culture. And this is why the whole Tiger Mom book exists.
Oh, yeah.
The Chinese parents, I have no doubt that my parents love me, but like they think they're motivating you by criticizing you and sometimes comparing you to your own sibling. It actually caused my sister and I to have a rougher relationship earlier on, especially on her end because she was a younger one. So she always felt like she couldn't catch up with me as the older sibling. We actually went to therapy, my sister and I, and we worked on our relationship as adults, and it was really nice. But we realized that in our parents, quest to try to make us the best people that we could be, sometimes they would put us up against each other to compete,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Like my mom will sometimes say things like, well, Maria's my sister's name. Maria's much smarter than you, like things like
my
that,
God.
like really crazy stuff. Like when you think about it as an adult, you're like, wow, like that is, and it's kind of crazy because it makes its way into my own narrative, right? I mean, first of all, I think my sister is much smarter than me, but like also I find myself saying that to people. Like it's part of my conversation now. Like, well, Maria's really the genius in the family. I just really worked hard for everything that and it's funny because it does stick with you. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that I think, again, many Chinese parents think that they're doing the best for their children by doing that. They'll compare me to my friends. They'll say, oh, well, so-and-so looks like they're doing much better at history than you are, right? And they don't think that that's actually something that's maybe not the most empathetic thing to say.
Right.
Because they think that they're driving you towards excellence. But my grandmother didn't care about any of that stuff. Like she doesn't care what I do. I mean, she knew I was a psychologist. She lived in Taiwan all her life. So we would only get to see her when I became an adult only once in a while. But my value was not based on what I did with my grandmother. And to me, that is such an important lesson because I think like you, I mean, I haven't taken the Enneagram. I have to do that. And then I have to get back to you because I probably am at least partially a type 2. And I think I sometimes judge my own self-worth by what I can do for others.
Sure.
And it's one of those things where you actually want to, right? Because I feel the passion in your work too. Like you actually want to do that. You want to help other people, but then also maybe there's an element of it that your self-concept might be tied to it as well. Yeah. And that can actually get to be a bit of a hamster wheel. And then it starts to make you question, what is my value when I can't do those things?
Right.
I'm a runner like you. And when I had an injury earlier this year and I couldn't run for 2 months, like I really suffered a knock to my self-concept as well. Like, because again, it's that achievement feeling that you get as a runner. You get that runner's high and you feel powerful when you run. And when I couldn't have running for like 6-7 weeks, it was really tough for me too. But the whole point of this is that my grandmother wouldn't have cared about any of that stuff. Like she doesn't care what I do. She loves me just because I'm me, and that I think is just such a wonderful feeling to know that exists.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm so grateful that you had her for the time that you did.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I definitely share the like getting injured because I've been injured. Runners get injured.
Oh, yes.
And the feeling like you can't run, and then I mean, my mind goes to like, I mean, I running it like my mind goes to this place where like running is my thing. Like this is who I am. This is how I meditate. This is how I, help my depression. But I know for me, like I've had to like, I'm 39. I've had to find other activities that help with that, like gardening, for instance, or things like that. I've had to like, I'm still struggling with it because running is such a pure joy for me, but it's not always going to be able to be that way.
I know. And I'm trying not to think too far ahead. So I'm a couple of years older than you. So to me, I feel like, it's on the horizon one day where I won't be able to run, or you're going to have to get a knee replacement or like something's going to
Right.
happen. Like already I feel my body breaking down. Like I used to run outdoors all the time. And now I really can't, my knees definitely can't do that. So I have to run mostly on a treadmill.
Okay.
And so like you were saying, I have been trying to expand my own self-care repertoire because even though running is the thing that brings me the most joy, I know I have to look at other things too. And I can't just be reliant on that for everything. But I can't tell you what it's like to, the difference between running and other types of cardio exercise. Like I remember when I got injured, my doctor said, well, you can get on a stationary bike. I'm like, okay, I might as well do nothing. Like, you don't understand. That does nothing for me. Like, but it's really funny. People are like, why are you so, this is like, you're very extreme about this. I'm like, because I can't describe it. Like you said, as a runner, maybe only runners really understand like just what running really does for your mental and physical health. And it makes me feel powerful. It is the way I meditate. It is a huge component of my self-care. And I run every single day.
I feel like you do need to read that what I talk about when I talk about running book.
I will. It sounds fascinating, and I think I'll get a lot out of it.
I think he's run every day for like 25 years. I think he's in his early 60s now, and he's still running.
Okay, well, that gives me hope.
Right? Well, Judy, thank you for being a part of this. Really appreciate you coming on. Will you tell the listeners where they can connect with you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and best of luck to your new branch of your business. I will be following what you do and again, cheering you on, and think that what you're doing is so valuable. Your listeners can follow me at Dr. Judy Ho. That's DrJudyHo on Instagram. And my website is drjudyho.com. I also have my own podcast, and it's called the Supercharged Life Podcast, where we talk about different tips to supercharge your life every day using scientific principles.
Amazing. Well, Judy, thanks again for being a part of this. It was such a joy.
Yes, it was a joy for me too. Thank you again for having me. It's an honor.
Of course. And to you listeners, as I always say, I'm here, you're here, we're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's you, me, empathy.